Hello everyone. In this video I will discuss one of the films called The Last Journey of Paul. And never forget that I always pray for you and your family to be happy and healthy always. In the near future, the Earth's temperature will reach a new level that is no longer tolerable. This has resulted in the extinction of most wild animal species and hundreds of millions of people becoming climate refugees. Meanwhile, the world's reserves of oil, coal and natural gas are also dwindling. Some time ago, a new planet called Red Moon suddenly appeared in the solar system. Immediately, humanity made a great effort to reach there to mine a mineral called lumina, a new mineral capable of revolutionizing science because its hyper-energy element renders all other energy sources on Earth obsolete. However, in the following years, something suddenly changed the trajectory of Red Moon, causing it to move directly towards Earth. It is certain that a collision between Earth and Red Moon will cause the extinction of all humanity. Worse yet, Red Moon also has a protective magnetic field that cannot be penetrated by any object. There is only one astronaut left named Paul, who is highly experienced and knows how to penetrate this protective field. But a few hours before the departure mission to Red Moon, the astronaut suddenly disappeared without a trace. Outside the large wall in the middle of the barren and dry plains of France, Paul stumbled with a voice in his head, urging him to embark on a journey and seek the truth. When he was young, Paul was once struck by lightning from Red Moon, unexpectedly granting him the ability to hear people's thoughts and feelings. However, this ability came with side effects, causing his hands to tremble, leading his father to create a special medication that Paul needed to inject regularly to manage it. Thanks to this ability, Paul had his own reasons for not wanting to destroy Red Moon, even though ecological disaster was imminent. Entering the settlement within the large wall, Paul asked a local resident where he could find a taxi stand. After ensuring they were not being watched by the guard named Caesar, the resident then invited Paul to his garage to offer him his flying car. The car was fully charged and capable of traveling for months. Paul was naturally interested in the offer, as he needed transportation to venture outside. Hearing this, Caesar was surprised because in the 14 years he had lived there, no one had dared to leave the protective wall. Unbeknownst to them, their transaction was being watched by a surveillance drone that quickly identified Paul as the wanted astronaut. Fortunately, Paul left before the authorities arrived at the garage. During his journey, Paul received a news broadcast announcing that humans only had 7 days left before experiencing doomsday. It was for this reason that not many people joined the search for Paul, despite the significant reward offered, as almost everyone in the world was busy spending time with their respective families. Additionally, Paul kept hearing a woman's voice in his head, urging him to find a forest. He had been hearing this voice since he was a child, which he later expressed through drawings. Not long after, Paul's car suddenly ran out of power, making him realize that he had just been tricked by Caesar. With no other option, Paul had to push his car to the nearest fuel station to buy a new Lumina battery. There he met a girl named Elma, who worked as a store attendant. She asked Paul to wait for 3 days until the desired battery was delivered to this location. At that time, there was a television news report informing the latest news, stating that Paul had not been found yet. The last hope of humankind relied on a spacecraft named Aurora, piloted by Elliot, who happened to be Paul's own biological brother. In a documented journey, it was seen that Elliot had successfully penetrated the protective magnetic field of Red Moon. However, Elliot realized that the spacecraft was moving too quickly, so he requested that the command center cancel the mission. Unfortunately, his request was immediately rejected, and the unfortunate event became unavoidable. The Aurora spacecraft controlled by Elliot caught fire and exploded. The incident certainly dealt a blow to Paul, who then tried to calm himself by leaving the store area. There, he found an old magazine with a picture of a high-ranking official from the space agency, who was none other than Paul and Elliot's biological father. This discovery reminded Paul of the last time he saw his mother, who later died from a mysterious illness. Meanwhile, Elma, who was spending time in her room, came across a television news report about the search for the most successful astronaut who had ever landed closest to Red Moon. This immediately made Elma realize that the person buying the battery from her was actually a sought-after astronaut. Elma grabbed a weapon and went outside, briefly being confronted by her father, who advised her not to go too far because the outside world was very dangerous. However, based on Elmer's attitude, it was evident that the relationship between father and daughter was not in a good state. Elmer then approached Paul to make sure that he was indeed the astronaut they were looking for and asked if she could join him on his journey. Deep down, Elmer had a strong desire to explore the outer world before Earth collided with Red Moon. However, Paul immediately rejected the request because his status as the most wanted person could endanger Elmer's life. Meanwhile, in a remote location, an escape pod from the Aurora spacecraft suddenly landed on Earth, carrying Elliot, who was still alive inside. After receiving medical treatment, doctors revealed that Elliot had undergone a surprising genetic mutation due to contact with Lumina on Red Moon, enabling him to come back to life abruptly, even though Elliot had been declared dead for an hour. What was even more astonishing was that Elliot now possessed supernatural abilities, allowing him to read the minds of others. So, as soon as his body began to recover, Elliot spoke to his father, asking to be allowed to go and find Paul. On the other hand, Elmer, who was playing with her sniper rifle, was suddenly startled by the arrival of several officers who had come to this place in an attempt to find Paul. Fortunately, thanks to Paul's ingenuity in hiding inside the water tank, he managed to escape. Afterwards, Elmer, attempting to return to her room, discovered that her father had deliberately set the room on fire. Naturally, Elmer was deeply affected by this event, as all the mementos that reminded her of her mother were inside. However, it was later revealed that her father had intentionally done this so that Elmer could break free from the memories of her departed mother, explore the outside world before Earth faced its imminent apocalypse, and meet her mother one last time. The next morning, Elliot arrived at the same shop after hearing that Paul had been there. Elmer's father, who actually knew that Paul was still there, attempted to lie by claiming that he had never seen the man in question. However, Elliot, who could read minds, immediately knew that the man in front of him was lying, and to everyone's surprise, Elliot had also developed his supernatural abilities to attack Elmer's father mentally, causing the man to commit suicide with his own pistol. Elmer, witnessing the event from behind the window, screamed in fear and tried to escape from Elliot, who then turned to chase her. Unable to run, Elliot released a spider-shaped robot to continue tracking Elmer's movements. Meanwhile, Paul, who had previously stolen a Lumina battery from Elliot's car, stopped his vehicle upon seeing Elmer sitting despondently on the side of the road. Feeling sorry for her, Paul allowed Elmer to get into the car, and together they drove away from the scene. During the journey, Paul revealed that he would only take Elmer away for one day, and after that, they would part ways because Paul's journey would be very dangerous, and he didn't want any harm to come to Elmer. In short, after driving for hours, they stopped at a diner where Paul tried to contact his father to inquire if Elliot was truly deceased. Paul's father, Henry, assured him that Elliot was fine and continued to persuade Paul to return to being an astronaut to save the world from the apocalypse threat. At the same time, a police officer suddenly appeared, aiming his gun at Paul and preparing to arrest him, but Paul immediately tried to fight back, although all his efforts were in vain, because the officer wore body armor. Fortunately, with Elmer's help, they managed to escape and quickly left the scene. During the next leg of their journey, Elmer convinced Paul that without her assistance, he might have been captured, and to repay her favor, Elmer forced Paul to reveal his past. With no choice, Paul recounted that when he was a child, he had visions of unexplained things. At that time, his father's space project was progressing well, allowing humans to begin mining the Lumina mineral on Red Moon. Paul knew deep down that what they were doing was wrong, but he couldn't explain why he had these visions and what they meant. Eventually, Paul discovered that the appearance of a red moon nearing Earth and causing changes wasn't the first time. He had tried to show his father what he found and repeatedly advised against approaching Red Moon. However, Paul's suggestions were always ignored because scientists assumed they could predict Red Moon's trajectory. In the end, their prediction was wrong, and it was too late. Essentially, Paul believed that Red Moon's appearance served to protect Earth from something not understood by humans. Therefore, if Red Moon were destroyed, Earth would inevitably be destroyed as well. That's why Paul refused his mission and continued to try to escape. On Elliot's side, he arrived at the restaurant previously visited by Paul. There, he tried to gather information from the owner and learned that Paul was traveling with a young girl. After obtaining all the necessary information, Elliot once again used his abilities to mentally attack the restaurant owner, leading the owner to commit suicide. Meanwhile, Paul, lying in the car's trunk to enjoy the fresh air, showed Elmer a picture of a forest he had been carrying. He explained that he had been on a long journey to find that place, which he believed would help him understand what Red Moon truly wanted. The next morning, Paul and Elmer, continuing their journey, were suddenly surprised by the appearance of another car attempting to chase them. The road they were on was blocked by a giant red dust storm that looked very dangerous. However, with no choice, Paul continued to drive into the storm, hoping to escape the pursuing car. At that moment, Paul noticed a spider-like robot appearing behind their car, realizing that this robot was what had been tracking them all along. Immediately after destroying the robot, Paul stopped the vehicle and took refuge in an abandoned cinema with Elmer. While waiting for the storm to pass, Paul played a recording of a film featuring various animals and plants in France just before the major extinction event occurred. In the footage, there was a video of a forest that made Paul realize it was the same forest he had been searching for. This realization left Paul disappointed and feeling foolish for hoping to find a forest area that had actually turned into a desert. In the morning, Paul was awakened by Elmer, who appeared very panicked because they were surrounded by officers under Elliot's orders. In an attempt to escape, Paul pretended to use Elmer as a shield, but the officers didn't care and blindly fired shots, accidentally injuring Elmer's stomach. Luckily, they managed to reach the car and quickly flee the scene. Meanwhile, Elliot, unwilling to lose track of his brother, immediately sped up his car to chase Paul. During the journey, the car's radio announced that they would reach a checkpoint in a few hundred meters, which made Paul even more panicked. Realizing the worsening situation, Elmer, with the remaining strength she had, quickly calibrated the car to make it fly, but Elliot's car also turned out to be capable of the same. In a final act, Elliot accelerated the car in the air at high speed, causing a collision with Paul's car. Surprisingly, all three managed to survive the incident, where Paul immediately got out of the car and pointed his gun at Elliot. There, Elliot used his abilities to continue persuading Paul to carry out his mission to destroy Red Moon and save the world. Paul, still firm in his stance, decided to aim the gun at his own head with the intention of ending his life. However, at that moment, Paul remembered his promise to Elmer to take her south to find her mother, so instead of committing suicide, Paul shot Elliot in the head. After the incident, Paul then carried Elmer's body and began to walk to seek medical help. Eventually, Paul arrived at a desert where his late mother was buried. It used to be a beautiful beach right behind Paul's house, but due to climate change, the area had turned into a dry desert. Accidentally stumbling upon his childhood book, Paul was once again found by the officers, leaving him no choice but to fulfill his duty. By doing so, Paul could request assistance from his father to bring medical teams and heal Elmer's wounds. It didn't take long for Paul to don his astronaut suit and quickly fly to Red Moon aboard a spacecraft equipped with a nuclear bomb. Being highly experienced with the Red Moon terrain, Paul easily navigated through the protective magnetic field without causing any damage to the spacecraft. However, as he neared the surface of Red Moon, Paul suddenly had a different plan. He decided to cut off communication with the Central Command and veer his spacecraft out of the protective magnetic field. At the same time, Elmer, who had been successfully rescued and heard the news of Paul's departure to Red Moon, stepped out of the ambulance to witness the sky directly. She continued to hope that Paul would complete his mission quickly and return safely to Earth. There, she also found Paul's childhood book, complete with the strange drawings he had made. At that moment, Elmer realized that the book contained certain drawings that seemed to depict events that would happen in the future. One page showed a picture of a rocket moving away from Red Moon, and when Elmer looked up, she saw Paul's rocket suddenly explode. It became clear that Paul intentionally detonated his own spacecraft to create a shockwave effect that could push Red Moon away from Earth. With tears still wetting her eyes, Elmer turned to the next page and found a drawing of a child holding an umbrella. Elmer immediately grabbed the umbrella nearby, and unexpectedly rain began to fall, soaking the earth. A rain Elmer hadn't seen since she was a child, and the film concluded. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.